Hello, everybody, and welcome to the July 24th Trips and Traps. Andy Serling, joined by Richard Migliore, your Saratoga Trips and Traps debut.
Yeah, you made me quite nervous when you informed me that earlier. A lot to talk about, especially Saratoga. The racing's so competitive, and we have such large fields. You know it's going to lend itself to some trips and certainly some traps.
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting horses to look at, and we're going to start out by taking a look at the way we should start the Saratoga Meet Trips and Traps with a 2-year-old maiden race and an unlucky loser in the 7 Ring Knocker, and no fault of jockey Jose Lescano, who rode this horse, just unlucky, breaks a little slow. We'll show you the trouble at the start, but also the winner of this race got an absolutely perfect ride by Jose Ortiz.
She really did. By the Moon, the winner, acted very professional in her debut. To be able to take the kickback, find a spot, wait behind horses, that's very unusual for a 2-year-old to do so well first time. But, Andy, you can see the filly that ran second, Ring Knocker, already kind of on the move.
Well, you know, you look at the winner's trip, Richie, By the Moon. Broke sharply, got in position. Jose was able to get the position he wanted. That's Jose Ortiz, whereas Jose Lescano, once you break a little slowly, and we'll show you the head-on and show what happened, you're wide here. He's behind the 8 ball from the start. I don't think there's much he could have done. He has to take his filly into the race.
Well, absolutely, especially with a young horse. They're going to get some kickback. They're not really sure what they're doing. It's their first start, so you want to get their mind going forward into the race. And once you start a horse, it's not like driving a car where you can let off the accelerator. They don't have multiple moves. The best thing in that case, Andy, is to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, if he had fought her and held her back, she probably resents it and doesn't get a lot out of the race. It was. I mean, this was a terrific performance to even be in a position to open up. And you have to remember, it was 9 3/4 lengths back from second to third here. Just an unlucky loser of this race for a number of reasons.
Yeah, both the winner and the second place finisher are nice fillies. One got a little better trip than the other. Ring Knocker won't be long in winning.
Yeah, and you want to talk about, you'll see Ring Knocker, the 7, gets in trouble, but John Velasquez is riding the 6 horse inside of her, and that's Vinalicious, and good job by him.
Keep your eye on Johnny's left arm. Look how much of an effort he makes to correct that filly. When you see a rider break his hands away from a horse's neck to straighten him up the way he did, that's when a rider is truly trying to keep a horse straight out of the gate.
Well, and this is something you and I have talked about quite a bit, and obviously that's what happened to Ring Knocker, by the way, at the start, where, you know, they don't have disqualifications, for instance, out of the gate with horses drifting in or out and causing actions, but sometimes maybe the riders could react a little more quickly.
Yeah, and you can see the difference when a rider actually tries to correct a horse, and when a rider says, well, it's out of the gate, I'm going to let them go 2 or 3 strides before I even think about straightening them up. And that's a huge pet peeve of mine. I think it's a part of the race where it's more dangerous than people realize. They're just getting their feet under them. They're big animals, and they don't have their balance yet. It's up to the riders to correct that situation.
And it's also really the most important part of a race, because the table is set by the start of races, and so often horses gain or lose, more often lose position at the start, and they haven't expended any more energy.
Well, I think this Trips and Traps in particular illustrates that more than ever, because several of the trips that we're going to continue to go over were caused because of horses not getting away cleanly and being out of position from the start of the race.
Yeah, well, that'll come up a number of times in some later races. Now we're going to look at another race, and this was a race that had a relatively clean break, but this was a very interesting running of our Sanford, because I think a lot of horses and perhaps some riders learned some things from this race.
The one thing I thought taken away from this race, we've got a talented group of 2-year-olds. This was a very roughly run race.
Zayat Color, sorry, in blue and back is Mr. Z. There's the 8, there's the 9. Go ahead, Richie,
yeah,
sorry.
And I just think that more than anything else, this is opening weekend. Some of the riders may be pressing a little bit, trying a little bit too hard, and I think it caused some trips that they probably regret.
Yeah, and it's interesting talking about it. And we'll talk about Cinco Charlie very briefly. He's dueling 3 wide in here. He finished 3rd. He ran an exceptional race, running hard the whole way in a fast pace. The others were in a position to take advantage of it, and there's Cinco Charlie. He's towards the front. Here is Mr. Z, as well as Nona's Boy. I think your feeling was that maybe Nona's Boy's move was forced a little bit as Mr. Z moved maybe a little early.
Well, Mr. Z moved aggressively here into the turn. Johnny Velasquez looks to his left. He sees this horse moving. He says, I can't allow him to go forward, get in front of me, push me out. And you can see right here, Johnny moves and basically runs him up in behind this wall of horses. And you're going to see Mr. Z check pretty hard, actually clip heels here. And if he wasn't a 2-year-old, because the 2-year-olds seem to be so much more athletic, he probably wouldn't have caught his stride the way he did, because even though he had a check and clip heels, he actually didn't lose as much as most horses would have.
No, he could have been completely taken out of the race, but it did cost him maybe a length and a half. And you see Big Trouble, the eventual winner, looms up outside of him. Nona's Boy maybe brought in the race a little too soon. soon, as you point out, because of the early move and what John Velasquez had to do. Mr. Z was the best horse in this race. I think this is probably a good riding experience, learning experience for his rider just coming to Saratoga.
Yeah, Corey Lannery, you know, he's a good rider, obviously. He's done very well in Kentucky. He's actually done very well wherever he's ridden. I think it's just human nature. You get to Saratoga, you want to showcase to people your talent, and you're probably trying to do a little too much. I'm sure Corey, in reflection, wishes he had just kind of said a little more patient and maybe waited and followed on his boy to get in the clear instead of allowing Big Trouble to get first run on him.
Yeah, and this just blew up in his face. These horses, I mean, he was in a total box, and, you know, it was kind of his doing and pushing Johnny in the race. And listen, these guys aren't Hall of Famers for no reason. They're Hall of Famers because they know how to react to situations like this.
And now we're going to see, you know, Corey's going to bull his way out a little bit here, maybe a little over-aggressive. Irad's doing his best to try to keep him in. You can see he's leaning into him, too. Corey's having none of that. He comes out, and eventually when Irad stops trying to keep Big Trouble on top of Mr. Z, his horse kind of kicks on. I think these are all talented horses. This might have been a dress rehearsal for next year's Derby, as roughly as it was run.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, this is an unusual Sanford, because sometimes we get these two-year-old races early in the year and they're smaller fields, and you just get the feeling they're horses, they're going to see better ones down the road. I got to tell you, I think that Cinco Charlie, whether he's a sprinter or not, is a very talented horse. Big Trouble, a big horse that's going to get better with more distance. Mr. Z has run well in both starts for Wayne Lucas. These horses can run.
Yeah, these are good horses, and I'm not giving up on Nana's Boy either. I know what I saw in his debut, his gallop out. I think he got involved, and plus he won so easy first time. Sometimes they don't get much seasoning out of it. I think he got a lot of seasoning out of this one.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing these horses come back, whether they're in the Saratoga Special or more likely pointing for the hopeful much later than meet. A nice group of horses as we turn our attention to another stake race run on Saturday with tractors not behind us, and we'll talk about Abaco, Richie.
Yeah, Abaco wound up fourth, beaten about a length and a half for everything, and she basically has no speed, and she's out of the race early, and then there was no pace on whatsoever in a race that I thought was actually going to have a pretty fair pace.
I think that's a little bit of what happened. She's easy to see. She's in those Phip silks. She's back in last. You know, let me ask you a question, Richie. Do you think the rider, Jose Ortiz, was trying to think, I just want to not be bunched up on the inside and in trouble, and I want to kind of extract her from the field, and it got away from him a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm sure he was anticipating more pace, pretty much like everybody else was, but you can see, I mean, they're just walking. For this caliber horse to go as slow as they went, you'd have to think that guys that went in with a preconceived plan, a preconceived notion, they were up against it. I mean, we see her Emoliant checking repeatedly because there's no pace on and she's running up on heels. She could have been one of the pace players. I was surprised she wasn't. And I think it affected the whole race. But the big thing that I thought Jose did wrong, honestly, was making an aggressive move wide when the race is picking up the pace. Basically the teeth of it.
Well, compare his ride to the ride that Frankie Dettorio gives the runner-up Stephanie's Kitten. She's on the outside in that spot. Very soon you're going to see Abaco move in the race. I think Frankie knew the pace wasn't fast, but at least he waited a little bit more to make his move.
Well, it's so hard to be wide chasing the pace when they're heating up, as opposed
you can roll
to
it from here, guys.
As opposed to sitting in there and hoping to get lucky. You have to be so much the best. You can see him making this aggressive move here, and you're going to be basically spun out to nowhere, Andy. You're going to be about 5-6 wide, and these horses are running now. They're not walking. You're not going to just run by the field.
Well, you know what's interesting? He's actually right on the flank of Stephanie's Kitten at that point, but the difference is he's had to do, he the rider, she the horse, had to do so much to get to that spot that Stephanie's Kitten, she hasn't even made a run yet.
Yeah, it's such a hard temptation to resist that you see this phalanx of horses in front of you, and you want to get out in the clear to make your run, but at the same time, they're running fast, so you're basically running like this. You have to almost be more patient at that point, stay in there, find somebody live, maybe Stephanie's Kitten to follow, and then work your way out.
Right, and that's the problem with ending up last in there and just falling a little too far back. We're not trying to be too hard on the rider. She's a horse that doesn't have much speed, and they probably wanted to make a move from the back of the pack, and they all thought there would be more speed. I guess if there's any sort of thing to be learned from it, it's that the preconceived notions are what get you in trouble, and you saw it more than Emoliant. Let the race develop in front of you a little more.
Allow your horse to break, run to the turn, and then if there's no pace on, you can take advantage of that situation. If you've come out already thinking, I'm going to be behind, well, now you're going to be behind, and you're a victim, basically.
Right, and you allow yourself to be a victim where it doesn't always have to be the case. Still, Abaco ran very, very well in the race. That's the final story in there, and whether she comes back in our Ballston Spa, if she gets any kind of honest pace, she'll be very tough.
She should be very tough, But, it's interesting. I remember having this conversation with the late, great Bobby Frankel. When there's no pace on and you're on a closer, that's when you have to be more patient and sit in there and hope you get lucky, because now that's the hand you've been dealt.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on in these races for sure, and people are riding very competitively. Now, here's a situation where Corey Lanerie gets very unlucky with the eventual third-place finisher, Island Therapy, at the start, and actually gave this horse a very good ride the more we watched it.
Yeah, and the start sets up his entire trip because, again, you give away that ground out of the gate, and now you're shuffled back out of position, and he basically did a great job dealing with the situation by saving every inch of ground.
Yeah, now we'll go to the pan shot in here, and we'll show you, and you'll see how much ground he loses. And we're also going to talk, though, about the 11 Hush Hush Mush Mush, who frankly might have run the best race. This horse kind of ran off on the rider.
Yeah, it looked like Javier was looking for a place to tuck in, some place to save ground. You're going to see when the 13 horse comes outside of him, it kind of sets him off. He gets rank, he jumps in the bridle, and again, I go back to this. They're not cars. A horse gets it in his head, he wants to go. They're 1,000-pound. The jockey's 115 pounds, and I think this horse basically ran off with Javier once he had that pressure on the outside.
Right, it's the 13 horse that really carries him into the race, because you see there's that moment where I think Javier felt like he might be able to tuck him in. Corey's got the 6, second to last, down towards the inside, saving ground. He makes a very good move. He's back here. The 11's up here. At this point, the 11, who was the best horse, has given away such an edge out of his game, rushed up near the lead. There's a very interesting point coming up the backstretch where Corey Lanerie and Island Therapy, he could have made, you're thinking of Abaco, that wide move, but he decided to tuck in, and it worked out well.
Well, he resisted that temptation, and I think reading how the things were playing out, getting off to not a great start, kind of getting bounced around, he said, you know what, I can't give away any ground. I've got to sit in there, hope I get lucky, and unfortunately late, he didn't get lucky, but boy, when he cuts the corner, Andy, that was a brilliant move. He made up 4 or 5 lengths. When he
it's amazing.
Corner.
And there he is outside. And this is a good illustration, this race. Hush Hush Mush Mush is towards the front end of just how much ground you can cover if you cut the corner. And he ended up doing it as adeptly as possible. He doesn't make the wide move here. You're going to see him come over, and it works out absolutely perfectly. Then, though, he gets in a little bit of traffic in the stretch. But I think you saved the ground and made that move than tried to swoop the field, Rich.
Well, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. This got him into the race, gave him an opportunity to win the race right here. I mean, and he's in tight. This takes an incredible amount of patience and courage to sit in there, and you're going to even see he gets through on the horse in the purple right here. That's a tight spot. Now he's got to come out looking for room. But if he doesn't do that, he's never in a position to win the race.
He's back here somewhere. He's back there 3-4 lengths behind, wide, with no chance to win the race. I mean, I was frustrated, and I thought he could have won the race, but the more I watched the race, and we're talking about it, I realized he did the best job he could with this horse. It's just a situation where they're so competitive here in the stretch, nobody's moving aside to let you out.
Well, and I think it's interesting, the rider on his outside that kind of kept him stuffed late was Irad Ortiz, the same rider in the Sanford. Sometimes you're almost like a magnet with another rider. You wind up in the same places with them. But it's competitive. I think Corey did everything he could with a tough situation. He just ran out of room there.
Yeah, it was an interesting race, and obviously Hush Hush Mush Mush. This is a horse, I wouldn't say this horse is a trap, because I do think he ran the best race. Thing with this horse is he's starting to disappoint at short prices. He got a little bit headstrong there. I don't really want him necessarily going further at another short price.
Well, you need everything to go right for him, it seems. And in these large competitive fields, very rarely does everything go exactly the way you want it to.
Speaking of everything not going exactly as you wanted to, the last horse we're going to take a look at was one of the favorites in our 6th race on July 21st, and this is the number 3 horse, Fireship. We'll start out by showing you the head-on. He gets bounced around a little bit at the start and takes him out of position.
And another illustration of just how important the start is at any distance, because it takes you out of your position. So you got buffeted about and kind of shuffled back a little bit, probably more than Sean Bridgman, the rider, would have liked. And kind of sets up a negative trip from there, because everything Sean did turned out to be wrong after that.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a race blowing up in your face, and you're obviously going to see the 3, and it's an easy horse to see. Got those white silks and the green hat, and you're going to see this horse, as Richie's pointed out, he's bumped a little bit at the start, just out of position the whole race, Rich.
Yeah, and then once Sean's kind of in that spot, he kind of angling out, looking for a place as they get into the backstretch, and now he's caught between horses every step of the way, and wide every step of the way. Just never any comfort zone whatsoever, Andy.
Yeah, this is a horse who a lot of us thought would be placed in the front end. Pace was not particularly fast in here. The break, though, took him out of his game, or took her out of her game, and from then it was just a nightmare every step of the way. And I think she did very well to finish fourth, beaten just over 2 lengths.
I agree, and it's such a stark contrast to the trip the winner had under scrutiny.
Yeah.
Under scrutiny, stayed on the fence, wound up every place she needed to go, a gap opened up. Now I had to move maybe a little bit earlier than you want, but in turf racing especially, you've got to kind of take what you can get when it opens up, and I really think that Angel Arroyo just gave a terrific ride here.
Well, it's what you're talking about, Richie, seizing an opportunity. Angel saw that hole going in there. Now, he could have got himself into a bit of a jackpot. He didn't have much choice, but he got his position so that he could hold that position into the turn.
Well, and again, as Sean was kind of stymied in an uncomfortable spot and had to go backwards, that was the same time the winner was going forwards. And what do we always say? If you can, you want to get your position going forward. And it was just a very stark contrast, the 2 trips. And if you switch trips, you know it's going to be a reversal in the order of finish.
It's not even close, Richie. It's not even 2 lengths. I mean, I don't know where the winner finishes if he gets the kind of trip the 3 got, but we know if the 3 was able to get through the 2 did, he would have won.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what makes it so interesting. Turf racing is so tough, so competitive, especially on the inner turf. You've got a big field. You've got 12 horses. Everybody's on top of each other. It's tight. You need some breaks. Unfortunately, Sean never got any breaks in this race.
No, it just didn't work out. And really, once again, it was the start that set the table for him and put him behind the 8 ball. And the other thing about watching these races and talking about them with you, Saratoga is a great opportunity to learn. I think it's a great opportunity for horse players and people that are trying to learn about watching races, whether you're looking for horses to bet back, but also trying to understand why did what happened happen. Because there's so many scenarios in big fields and horses that are relatively competitive where we could run these races 10 times and get 6 or 7 winners sometimes, and it's what happens during the race that leads to the final result.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're not watching replays every day, you're really losing out. It's a huge edge. You've got to watch, and for me, it's a 12-horse field. I had to watch this race 12 times to get a complete feel for it, because you can't watch the whole field. You have to watch individual horses and the trips they had. So you can rely on trips and traps, but also do your own work. We got replay centers all over the track.
Yeah, the replay centers are there. You can watch the races on the website, and there's so much you can learn for the future. I think one of the best things to do for handicapping science is just watch races, not races you even bet, especially these big fields, and get a feeling for what kind of moves work and what don't work. And if you do that and you come up with any ideas, you can email us at tripsandtraps@NYRank.com.